During my childhood, my family was like a drop of water in a river. We never stayed in one place for long. We settled in Rhode Island when I was 8, and we stayed there until I went to college in Colorado Springs. Most of my memories are anchored in Rhode Island. However, there are also fragments in the storage of my brain that belong to the different houses we lived in when I was much younger. Most of these memories are blurry and meaningless. Chasing a boy, attempting to build a raft to float down a stream behind our rented apartment in Pennsylvania, and so on. But there is a series of memories that remain crystal clear as if they were formed just yesterday. Often, I wonder if these memories are merely dreams that emerged from the prolonged illness I experienced this spring. But in my heart, I know they are true. We lived in a house outside the bustling gates of the new vineyard metropolis. Population: 643. It was a big house, especially for a family of 3. There were several rooms that I didn't even see during the 5 months we stayed there. In a way, it was wasteful space. But at the time, it was the only house on the market, and it was only an hour's drive from my father's workplace. The day after my 5th birthday, I developed a fever. The doctor said I had mononucleosis, which meant no rough play and more fever for the next 3 weeks. It was a terrible time to be confined to bed. We were in the process of packing our things to move to Pennsylvania, and most of our belongings were already in boxes, making my room look terribly messy. My mother brought me ginger ale and books several times a day, which served as my primary forms of entertainment for the next few weeks. Boredom lurked around every corner, waiting to reveal its ugly face and worsen my misery. I don't remember exactly how I met Mr. Widemouth, but I believe it was about a week after being diagnosed with mononucleosis. My first memory of this little creature is asking him if he had a name. He told me to call him Mr. Widemouth because his mouth was so wide. Actually, everything about him was oversized compared to his body. His head, his eyes, his crooked ears. But his mouth was by far the largest. "You look like some kind of Furby," I said as he flipped through one of my books. Mr. Widemouth stopped and looked at me with a confused expression, asking Furby, "What's a Furby?" "You know, the toy, the little robot with big ears. You can pet them, feed them, almost like a real pet," I said. "Oh, you don't need one of those. They're not the same as having a real friend," he said. I remember that Mr. Widemouth would always disappear whenever my mother came into the room. "I hide under your bed," he explained later. "I don't want your parents to see me because I'm afraid they won't let us play together anymore," he added. We didn't do much during the first few days. Mr. Widemouth just looked at my books and was fascinated by the stories and pictures they contained. On the 3rd or 4th morning, after I first encountered him, he greeted me with a wide grin on his face. "I have a new game we can play, but we have to wait until your mother has checked on you. She shouldn't see how we play it. It's a secret game," he said. After my mother brought books and soda at the designated time, Mr. Widemouth emerged from under my bed and took hold of my hand. "We have to go to the room at the end of this hallway," he said. I hesitated at first because my parents had forbidden me from leaving my bed without their permission. But Mr. Widemouth persisted until I gave in. The room in question had no furniture or wallpaper. Its only notable feature was a window opposite the door. Mr. Widemouth ran across the room and gave the window a push, causing it to swing open. Then he beckoned me to come over and look down from the window to the ground. We were on the 2nd floor of the house, but it was situated on a hill, so it was more than 2 stories high from the ground due to the elevation. I like to let my imagination play here. I imagine there's a big soft trampoline beneath the window. And I jump. If you believe hard enough, you'll spring back up like a feather. "I want you to try it," he said. Being a feverish 5-year-old, only a hint of skepticism crossed my mind as I looked down and assessed the possibilities. "That's a long fall," I said, "but that's part of the fun. It wouldn't be fun if it were a short fall. If it were, you might as well jump on a real trampoline," he said. I imagined myself falling through the air, only to bounce off something invisible to the eye. But the realist in me prevailed. "Maybe another time." I don't know if I have enough imagination. I might get hurt, I said. Mr. Widemouth's face twisted into a growl. But only for a moment. If you say so, he said. Disappointment evident in his voice. He spent the rest of the day under my bed, as quiet as a mouse. The following morning, Mr. Widemouth arrived with a small box. I want to teach you how to juggle. Here are a few things you can practice with before I give you lessons, he said. I looked into the box, and it was filled with knives. My parents will kill me, I screamed, horrified that Mr. Widemouth had brought knives into my room. Objects that my parents would never allow me to touch. I'll be beaten and punished for a whole year, I said. Mr. Widemouth frowned. It's fun to juggle with them. I want you to try it, he said. I pushed the box away. I can't. I'll get in trouble. Knives aren't safe enough to just throw up in the air, I said. Mr. Widemouth's frown darkened into a sinister glare. He took the box of knives, slid under my bed, and remained there for the rest of the day. I wondered how often he was there. After that, I started experiencing sleep disturbances. Mr. Widemouth would often wake me up in the middle of the night, claiming he had placed a real trampoline beneath the window, a big one that I couldn't see in the dark. I always declined and tried to go back to sleep. But Mr. Widemouth would still try to persuade me. Sometimes, he would stay by my side until early morning, attempting to coax me into jumping. It wasn't fun to play with him anymore. One morning, my mother came to me and allowed me to go outside. She thought the fresh air would do me good, especially after being confined to my room for so long. Swiftly, I put on my sneakers and stepped onto the back porch, yearning for the feeling of the sun on my face. Mr. Widemouth was already waiting for me. I want to show you something, he said. I must have looked at him strangely, because then he said, it's safe, I promise. I followed him to the beginning of a forest trail that led into the woods behind our house. This is an important path. I had many friends your age. When they were ready, I would lead them along this path to a special place. You're not ready yet, but I hope to take you there one day, he said. I returned to the house, wondering what place lay at the end of that trail. 2 weeks after meeting Mr. Widemouth, the final load of our belongings was packed into a moving truck. I would sit in the passenger seat next to my father on the long journey to Pennsylvania. I contemplated whether I should tell Mr. Widemouth that I was leaving, but even as a 5-year-old, I began to consider whether his intentions were truly in my best interest. No matter what he said, for that reason, I decided to keep my departure a secret. At 4 a.m., my father and I sat in the truck. He hoped to make it to Pennsylvania by tomorrow afternoon with an endless supply of coffee and a 6-pack of energy drinks. He seemed more like a man preparing to run a marathon than one willing to sit still for 2 days. Early enough for you? My father asked with a hint of sympathy. I nodded and rested my head against the window, hoping to get some sleep before the sun rose. I felt my father's hand on my shoulder, and he said, "This is our last move, son, I promise. I know it's been tough for you, being as sick as you were. Once I get promoted, we can settle down, and you can make friends." I opened my eyes as we pulled out of the driveway. I saw the silhouette of Mr. Widemouth at my bedroom window. He stood motionless until we turned onto the main road. He bid me farewell with a wave, holding a steak knife in his hand. I didn't wave back. Many years later, I returned to New Vineyard. The plot where our house once stood was empty, except for the foundation. It was as if the house had burned down a few years after we left. Out of curiosity, I followed the forest trail that Mr. Widemouth had shown me. Part of me expected him to jump out of the bushes at any moment to scare me to death. But I sensed that he was gone. It seemed like he had somehow been connected to the house that no longer existed. The path led me to the New Vineyard Memorial. I noticed that most of the gravestones belonged to children. A recently married couple used their honeymoon to travel across the United States by car. One night, it started raining heavily, and in the headlights, they saw a bearded man standing by the side of the road, hitchhiking. The husband immediately reacted to the bad weather and pulled over to give the man a ride. The man thanked them and got into the back seat of the car. He seemed agitated and nervous and barely said a word during the car ride. Shortly after, the couple dropped him off at an intersection. They continued driving, and the husband turned on the radio. Soon after, the radio program was interrupted for an important announcement. A prisoner has escaped from a mental institution. He is mentally ill and extremely dangerous and should not be approached under any circumstances. The couple was shocked. The description matched exactly the hitchhiker they had picked up. They were relieved that nothing bad had happened. At that moment, the car broke down and the engine simply shut off. The man had no choice but to walk in the rain to seek help. He insisted that his wife stay in the car. The man set off, and the woman tried to turn on the radio in the car, but it didn't work. The car battery was likely dead, so she decided to take a nap. A short while later, she woke up and saw flashing police lights through the water on the windshield. A voice from a loudspeaker said to her, "Lady, open the door, get out of the car, and run to us as fast as you can." Immediately, the woman was confused but complied. Stepping out of the car with both hands raised above her head, "Run and don't look back," the officer commanded. But the woman was curious and turned around. In the bright headlights and pouring rain, she saw the hitchhiker with a machete hacking away at the mutilated body of her husband on top of the car. Blood was flowing down the sides of the vehicle. She screamed and fainted as the police officers fired wildly at the hitchhiker. Dear followers, I am pleased to announce my channel, Midnight Macabre, where you will find an exciting collection of horror stories. If you are a fan of thrills and suspense, this channel is specially designed for you. You will enjoy a unique and terrifying experience as I share chilling tales that will take you on a journey into the world of mystery and nightmares. Expect captivating details, creepy characters, and a focus on storytelling to stimulate your imagination and leave a lasting impression. I am eager to hear your feedback and suggestions regarding the stories and additional content you would like to see on the channel. Please subscribe to Midnight Macabre. Please subscribe to Midnight Macabre and activate notifications to be the first to receive the latest terrifying stories. Thank you very much for your support and participation in this haunting adventure. I look forward to seeing all of you on my channel. Best regards, Midnight Macabre.